Hi, Psychically Yours here with a kind of like a deck review. I call it Unreviews. I've been doing them on the Instagram TV, and I decided to do it on YouTube and Instagram. But the unreview is something a little different, like an unboxing. Somebody just got the deck and they're opening it in front of you, and it's kind of first impression. This is more like worked with the deck for a while, and giving you my impressions after working with it. So it's a little bit different. I call it an unreview because I don't know, I have a big affinity for like Alice in Wonderland and stuff, so I was like, oh yeah, let's call it an unreview because it's a little different than other reviews. So this is going to be about working with this deck and its durability over time. So since it's October, Halloween, I'm doing the Halloween Tarot. Here's the box. I got the big, it's empty. I got all the stuff laid out here. I got the box set. You can also just get the deck by itself or just the book by itself, but I got the set with the book. It also comes with the little white book, of course the deck, and then of course this thing. So I got this deck a year ago. I got it last year because I was like, I really want a Halloween deck. So I was like, I'll get the Halloween tarot because there's not a whole lot of like just Halloween themed decks, and definitely not any like Samhain themed deck, which is like something I'd really love. The closest I think would be Santa Morte, which is a deck I really want and been thinking about getting this year. So I've had this deck for a year. I've worked with it for a year. So that's why it's an unreview. It's, generally people do reviews after they just got it. So I've had this for a year. And I wanted to start out with just the contents like I just showed you. Now this I've never used. Any deck I get, I hardly ever look at this at all. And then this thingy here, it's like a Celtic Cross spread, but they call it the Ancient 10 card tarot spread, but it's the Celtic Cross spread. I get these in a lot of decks. I don't use them. That's why it looks brand new after a year. I never used it. I put it right back in the box, keep it for whatever, keepsake, I guess, I don't know. But I never used those. So all I really got the set for was the book and the cards. The book is kind of meh for me. When I first got it, I read it. It's a neat little book. If you don't know anything about the history of Halloween, then it'd probably be a little bit more interesting to you, but a lot of what is in it as far as the history of the Halloween, how to use tarot cards, that kind of thing, is this kind of reiterated stuff I've already heard before, but it doesn't seem any out of line with anything I've ever read before. So it's just kind of like a basic overview of some Halloween history, and then it goes into like any other book, tarot guidebook, and tells you about each card. They're black and white, as you can see here in the book. But yeah, I read through it when I first got the deck. It was interesting, read through it pretty quickly. I already know meanings of most of the cards, so it wasn't, like I said, it's kind of meh for me. If you're really new to tarot, it might be a little bit more helpful for you. It might give you a little bit more information, or if you haven't really researched into the history of Halloween, it might be new information for you. But for me, most of it is stuff I already knew. It's like a basic overview, nothing real detailed. As you can tell, it's not a really big book, but it's interesting to have. In the notes I just read over this earlier. In the notes I did my deck interview, and I just read over it before I did this, and it was a pretty good reading right there. A lot of my decks that I get now, I do a deck interview when I first get them, so it was really interesting to read it after a year of doing it, how it aligns with how I feel about the deck, and a lot of it does. There's some things I forgot, but a lot of it is like, oh yeah, this is kind of how this deck is. So with that, let's get into the deck. It comes in this little box. You can also get this deck in a tin, I believe, by itself. but I got the set, so it comes in a box. I don't have the title cards in here. I have them as part of another little tarot decoration that I have put up right now, but it does have a title card. But as you can see, this deck, after using it for a year, it's still straight. The cardstock's really good and it's really held up. That's one of the big things I find with these unreviews that's really helpful, is you always see the unboxings and the reviews when you first get the deck, and they're like telling you about the cardstock, and it's pretty good cardstock. I can show you after a year. It's not real heavy use, but I've used it all throughout the year, and I've shuffled it quite a bit. It holds up pretty well, and that's what I think is pretty interesting about these unreviews, is you can see how the cardstock has held up over time, because some of my decks are very bent. This one's very straight. This is pretty good, sturdy, long-lasting cardstock, as far as the physical quality of this deck. So if you haven't checked out this deck before, any kind of flip throughs or anything else, this deck is pretty much straight up a Halloween themed Rider-Waite-Smith deck. They took the classic 1910 deck and put Halloween theme to it. They've changed the suits. Here we have the Hierophant. See, they've made the Hierophant a mummy. The Hangman is like the Scarecrow. They just kind of, as you can see, has the same basic imagery, but Halloween themed. Now the different suits, as I was saying, there's pumpkins for pinnacles, which makes sense. And they explain all that in the book, why they chose the Halloween themed suits. But pumpkin, of course, pinnacles, earth, that's obvious. The one that trips up a lot of people, I've heard, who also use this deck, is the cup suit. That is ghosts. It kind of makes sense, especially how they explain it in the book. Ghosts are kind of like emotions, and they're friendly ghosts. They're like Caspers, okay? And then you have imps for wands. Those are the fire suit. And then the other suit, what am I missing? I did pinnacles, cups, wands. Okay, swords are bats. Oh, I said at the beginning, I had to think for a second. And then there's a card right at the bottom. There we have the 7 of bats, where he's stealing away. Again, like I said, this is, if you're familiar with Rider-Waite-Smith, you're like, yeah, that's totally the 7 of Swords. So if you know the Rider-Waite-Smith well, you won't have a hard time remembering which suit is which, because it's so close to that classic imagery. Like, they just took the Rider-Waite-Smith, made it Halloween. That's what this deck is about. They don't really change the card meanings. They're really just trying to like put this Halloween veneer over it, if that makes sense. This, as far as this goes for me in reading it personally, it is not one of my favorite decks, even though I love Halloween. And am a very witchy type person. It's not one of my favorite decks, but I do like it. And I do feel like it's a lot like working with the Rider-Waite-Smith. But at the same time, it does have its own kind of little character to it. So it is a little different, but basically a lot like working with that classic deck. Basically it embodies Halloween in the Rider-Waite-Smith style. So it might be a little bit different for you, but yeah, for me it's just kind of like working with that, like a stylized Rider-Waite-Smith. The interesting characteristic to this deck, though, is that every card has this little black cat. And I think that's really cute, and I really like it. And a lot of times he does stand out, but he's on every single card. They mention in the book as well that this little black cat is in every single card. He could almost be like you, the reader, or the querent, you know, their view of the situation, or whatever you want to. I just think it'd be really neat to make up a story of the black cat. And he has different expressions. There's some cards that he's just kind of curious. in a lot of them. Some of them he's looking at certain things. There's some where his hair is standing on end. So it's really interesting. He does have different reactions to different cards. Like here on the big box, he has his hair on end. See? So he is a little different. It's not just like, oh, the same little black cat. It's the same black cat, but it's not the same like exact depiction of him. Like you could see in that one, I think it's the Empress I just showed you, where she's holding him, you know, he's being petted. Here he's up here just observing. Or the Seven of Pumpkins. Then in the World, he is the center of your focus. So I think that's a really neat little quirk of this deck. It's something that's super important, but really neat about it. And to wrap this up, I know a lot of other readers I've seen that have this deck. They like to use it for ancestor readings or past life readings. For me, it kind of works for any situation because, like I said, for me, it's kind of another view of the Rider-Waite-Smith, but it can also be great. It really has that great feeling, though, too, of Halloween, and can really be used for the Halloween-themed type readings. Is good for that as well. So, I guess I'll just wrap it up there. For very last, I do keep it in this. It has a little black cat on it. I thought it was cool. So, anyway, we'll wrap it up there. I hope you enjoyed this. If you're thinking about getting this deck, maybe it helped you a little bit to see a review after using it for a while. I think that's like the best idea ever. I don't know, maybe I'm tooting my own horn, but go ahead and give me your comments, your thoughts, ways I could improve, anything else you'd like to know about this deck. As I'm losing my voice, we'll wrap it up there with Blessed Be.